All right, so I kind of like this question. This is a good question. By the way, if you want to ask me a question specifically about personality disorders, scottc at saltcitycounseling.com. If you would like to ask me a question, and if it's a good question, with your permission, maybe I'll do a video on it. So this question is an interesting one. Are you afraid of people with personality disorders? Are you afraid of someone who has narcissistic personality disorder? And truthfully, I used to be. I'm not anymore. I am actually afraid of sociopaths, antisocial personality disorder. They do scare me. But here's the thing about BPD. Even though they have this blind rage, even though they are very irrational, even though they do some pretty extreme things sometimes, I have become convinced that they are actually conscientious of their behaviors. Conscientious they make others. I know it doesn't seem like it. I do. I get it. They don't admit it because of how much pain they perceive that will cause them. Again, they have very irrational fears. They're dominated by these irrational fears, and if the irrational fear says, if you admit that you have caused harm, horrible things will happen from it. What they don't realize is that taking accountability is actually a relationship skill that really, really brings down the walls, opens bridges, creates empathy. And yes, it can hurt to take accountability for the harm that you've caused for somebody, but it actually causes more harm in your relationship to not do that. But when it comes to BPD, you can't tell them that very easily. That's not feedback that they take very easily. Their emotions will always dominate them. But here's what I've noticed, and here's why this question is significant, is because those who are in relationships with either a narcissist or someone who has borderline, they tend to walk on eggshells. They are afraid, right? Walking on eggshells is a reference of like, when is the next explosion going to happen? And we just tiptoe around trying to avoid those explosions because I'm afraid of those explosions. And being afraid of those explosions, what people don't realize, being afraid of the anger from someone with a personality disorder is actually enabling them and more likely to result in that explosive behavior. And there are several reasons why. Number one is, let's say that, because I think I've used this example before, maybe not, I don't know, I don't remember, but I'm going to do it anyways, okay? Because I see this all the time. You were like, you get a text from your BPD partner, and maybe you're at a work meeting, maybe you can't get back to them right away, and what happens when they see you again, or you talk to them again? Why didn't you text me back? Right? And they they have a tendency to come at you like that, and they lack the emotional control to manage their behavior, to not like just absolutely full-blown blitz people. And maybe if they approached it in a more calm manner, because what happens when they come at you like that? Whoa! You feel your balls jump in your throat, and you start stammering. And they see you doing that. I was in a meeting, right? And when you do that, in their mind, he's lying. You liar, you're lying because you're doing that stammery thing. And I've gotten a lot of effectiveness out of answering questions from them directly and calmly. I've gotten a lot of effectiveness with that instead of like doing this stammery thing. But I've also gotten really good at setting boundaries. I've gotten really good at saying, hey, yelling it's not gonna get you anywhere. I need you to lower your voice, or I will terminate the session. It's called setting boundaries. It's important. It's needed. People with personality disorders have been known to terrorize a clinic. It just stomp around and be angry and yell at the clinician and person at the front, and what we think that because they're an adult they're allowed to do that. And at my clinic, as the clinical director, I have no issue of saying, hey, your behavior is inappropriate and I need you to either lower your voice or you can leave. And but here's what I've learned about. I've learned several things about personality disorders. One is there's a lot of smoke, not a whole lot of actual fire. They make threats that are this big. Can't see my arm. They make threats that are this big, and the follow through ends up fizzling. It ends up being this big. Okay, I call it frilled lizard. You know the frilled lizard where they and they they open up that frill to make themselves look bigger and scarier than they actually are. I also like to use the metaphor of the Wizard of Oz, right? You know, if you've watched the old Wizard of Oz film where Dorothy and her weird friends go into the wizard's chamber, and there's just this loud voice and this big head and the flames, and the whole place is shaking. And it turns out that he's just this wimpy, just a scared, wimpy guy behind a curtain, right? And I have found that people with personality disorders more so are more like the Wizard of Oz, where they make a lot of noise and they can be very scary, but do very little to actually hurt you. And I say that when I know that people with BPD, for example, are notorious for hitting people, throwing things at people. Narcissists tend to be male, so they may be big, they may be scary, they may be strong. But here's the other thing that I've learned about people with personality disorders is that they are generally more scared of you than you are of them, and they just kind of put up a big show. And just last year, I had a run-in with a father who I believe was absolutely, without a doubt, a narcissist. And he was upset about some of the things that I discussed in a session where he attended via the phone, and his son was present. And so he asked if he could speak to me privately. When I called him on the phone, he proceeded to scream at me. He was extremely aggressive on the phone. And I knew that was one of the most aggressive parents that I've ever talked to. And I'm convinced that he requested to speak to me alone so that he could bully and intimidate me, because that's what he does to people. That's what a narcissist does. That's what they do. And for me, it was just a matter of saying, I just stopped him. I said, no, this is inappropriate. I'm ending this call right now. If you cannot lower your voice and be respectful, I'm going to end this call right now. And I had my finger on the hang up button when he backpedaled really, really quick, and he went back to like I just literally like that. And the thing is, if you show fear for someone who has narcissism or someone who has borderline, that actually seems to kind of throw gas on the fire, where that just almost seems to encourage them in a way to proceed down the road of which they are going. Anyways, so I do not believe, for the most part, that those with narcissism or borderline are actually that dangerous, can actually really there are things, by the way, and this is a whole separate topic. If you engage someone with a personality disorder in certain ways and you make them angry, they're more likely to follow through with stuff. So one of my rules with my high conflict co-parenting basically is to put resistance on the back end on things, because they will follow through with some of the craziest stuff you've ever heard of just to win. These are the types of people, they will burn down the house just to kill a spider. It's important to keep that in mind. Hopefully coming soon is my Udemy course on my 11 rules for co-parenting with high conflict type. It's a little bit of a longer course, but lots of good content on there. So if you like this video, if you think this content is good, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.